Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Tutumoe te Monga, ko Waipawa te Awa, ko Pākehā te Iwi, ko Pāka tuku whānau, ko Warren Pāka tuku ingoa. Well, my job is to sum up, but I just wanted to highlight where I was born, in the middle of a forest. And the Waipawa River, which many of you may have crossed over, started at the back end of our farm. And I have done a little bit of restoration over the last decade on a voluntary basis. I restored the gully of my neighbour, removed pine trees, planted it into natives, put in 1 kilometre of walkway, and it's there for future generations. I wanted to do two things in summing up this session. Was first to just highlight a few things at Pāmu, because we're a large nationally company, state-owned enterprise that's owned by you, and what we do matters. We have a large forest estate, some 13,900 hectares of exotics. Pinus is the main one, but you'll see those other species, some 23,000 hectares, close to 8,000 hectares and another 3,000 hectares in line to go into the QE2. We plan to plant another 1,500 hectares per year through to the year 2030. And last year we planted 356 hectares of natives, and that includes productive species, commercial manuka, non-productive about 1,500 hectares. So it's match the site to the purpose, to the long-term need. Natives, which you've heard about, include the logging of totara in Northland and thinning of stands as described by Paul and others. And when we design forests, they're designed into the landscape to complement, and that's one of the things that I want to highlight. We need each other, natives and exotics, and pastoral farms need trees. And rather than talk about substitutes and competition, we need to think about how we work together to maximise the benefits. Down in the Te Anau Basin, we've been working in a community with the Waia River Group, and here's an example on Duncragan Farm, regeneration 2013-2022. But there are hundreds of hectares have been set aside with Pāmu and the wider farming group to help regenerate the Waia River. We've got a big emissions challenge. This is 2017, about 700,000 tonnes of CO2 with big numbers of livestock, and our challenge, biogenic challenge, is to reduce that by 67,000 tonnes by 2030. We've got a plan to do that, and one of the things that I wanted to highlight is we're not just driven by the ETS. We also take into account the sustainable finance, the TCFD. I think that's going to be one of the most material influences in decisions about what we do with our land, and will drive emissions reduction. Certainly in the loan that we signed up with Westpac for 85 million, we've set a target aligned to science-based targets, because access to future markets is reliant on us demonstrating we're aligning to the targets the companies we're supplying to. So many of them have set a 2-degree target, some have set a 1-degree target. And at the moment we're working on a 4% reduction. The other impact on us has been the National Policy Statement for Freshwater, and actions related to freshwater are often complementary and synergistic to that for climate change and equally for biodiversity. The NPS is not yet in effect, so that hasn't played through in terms of SNNAs, but we've got a big focus on biodiversity and the future potential to create value from ecosystem services and regenerate natural capital. Over the last few days, there's been some memorable moments. Most of our forests have no underpants, so I record a few. These, you can read them, right? We need to stop the natives exotics debate, find out how to work each other, respect our differences, and as Oliver eloquently put, if we want to move politically, we've got to go with a joined up voice and think about what are the big rocks we need to put in place to get momentum. Our forests are in trouble. Deer, goats, weeds, stoats, rats, possums. Nearly 27 million eggs and chicks losses per year. What about we trap 150 deer a week? They reduce farm productivity by 12%. We saw the costs of natives. We also have little lowland forest remaining. That's where some of the emphasis about building out from QE2 and other initiatives could make jolly good sense. And wouldn't it be better to have a pet kakapo than a dog or a cat? Yeah? You know, natural regeneration is a wonder of nature. That's what Fiona told us, to self-heal. And what about site selection matters? You know, where we put trees and choose to put trees. A tree in the wrong place is a weed. And Porter Williams, the minister, reminded us about societal change and conservation go hand in hand. That's why collective voice, and this coronet planting where you saw 600 people plus turn up to plant 10,000 trees in a day, is illustrative of the impact of people working together. And what about transition forests are only a problem when people overdo it, right? You can have too much of a good thing. Wrong tree in the right place, we might need some, but not too many. Tim reminds us we don't have to do it all here. We can learn a lot from people offshore. And that session this morning highlighted, you know, our future with those types of leaders that rangatahi was inspiring, wasn't it? You know, or as young people, we have relatively little power. Those who have more power have a responsibility to do more and a responsibility to use this to play their part. That includes me. And we need to find ways to better cost the cost of inaction and to understand that when we take action, we create massive co-benefits. And our future needs action on this now. Examine what you're doing and ask, what more can I do? Well, think of your kids. I've got 5 grandchildren, and they'll see 2100. And the legacy that I'm leaving them. Now, a lot of young people don't know, don't care, but keep working to build awareness for them. Let's turn them on and help them get connected to nature. And that's why education matters. There was a study done recently by the forest industry as their teachers displayed a level of negative perception about the forest sector and are not able to articulate how to fit forestry, into the current school system of learning. Forestry is not well recognised to other wider food and fibre school engagement programs. And the rangatahi said, make education accessible, practical, help us to connect. In the Forestry Ministerial Advisory Group, we've got an initiative next year to meet with the Department of Education, TEC, to talk about how do we align the education curriculum to our future that we need to create. And we should never forget that 87% of New Zealanders live in cities, in urban areas. And urban forestry is powerful. And you know, the ability for Christchurch to create an 800-hectare urban forest on the red zone, that's inspirational. Imagine that in 2050, walking through that once devastated zone, recreated. Here in Wellington, Miramar nearly eliminated rats. And we've busted a few myths. You know, one of the things about myths is it says we talk past each other. We need to listen more. Carefully. You know, Dave Norton, farmers don't give a toss. Well, actually they do. Young people don't give a toss. Well, we heard the Rangatahi this morning. They do. Declaring something significant doesn't make a difference. You need to do something. The ministers told us, people said the government isn't interested in carbon sequestration on farmland. Well, we heard from both of them, they are. We just got to find out and give them a way to do it. Permanent native forests can't be identified in the ETS. Well, they can. But transitional forests are going to complicate it. At Toitu, there's a tag on native biodiversity credits and a 30% premium. Plantation forests are devoid of biodiversity. They have biodiversity. Maybe not as much as a mature native forest, but let's not call them biodiversity deserts. Plantations forests are subsidised. They're not. 78% of the money in the 1 billion tree program went to natives. In fact, at Pāmu, we repaid the grants, right? Because we were asked to help stimulate replanting. Where the big subsidy is in the heavy emissions. Where are the free credits allocated? Steel, concrete, pastoral farming. We've got to find ways to move ahead. Some people say we don't have a deer, goat, tar problem. Well, Sam definitely illustrated. We do. And, you know, native forests are not immune to climate change effects. They're exposed to droughts. Kauri tree, you go and walk on the ridgelines in Northland and see Traiari dying because of drought. Disease and wind impact them as well. So I just think, you know, farmers are doing good with the land and good on them, and let's celebrate them, make them heroes, recognise it. And here's an example, Fonterra, you know, supposedly working with Kapira farmer down by Christchurch, where they are offsetting to generate carbon zero milk and establishing new native forests. Lizzie knows about this, was that we went to a launch of this zero carbon beef, nature positive. And we know that one of the biggest challenges to our forests is pests. And I want to give a shout out. I was on the board, the establishment board of Pretty Free 2050. Do you know that was our moonshot? New Zealanders said, yes, that's a great thing to do. And by 2025, we aim to have 1 million hectares under control, large predator-free areas without fences, predator-free offshore islands, and one new science project. We made excellent progress. The other day, Devon McLean told me, we have eliminated stoats, possums and rats from 44,000 hectares in South Westland. That is amazing. And in Murima, right, we can look after, this is the point, DOC looks after 1/3 of New Zealand. The non-DOC land that's owned by private landowners, by Māori, by regional councils needs to be coordinated and bring investment together to drive predator eradication. And I want to give a shout out to the Ploughmans and the Next Foundation, like Sir Stephen, have done exceptional work. But predator eradication and sticking to our guns when we put in place initiatives becomes important. The next new shiny thing on the block is always more attractive, but there are hard yards to be done in restoring nature. And there we have, in Europe, forest dying, we saw that. Here, Kauri dieback, my daughter's working hard in that program. Fires, wind, flood, affecting exotics, natives. Here's the availability forecast. The thing about forests is you've got to view two ways. One is a mitigation role, and then there's the adapted economy. And that was the question that we posed yesterday. Do we have enough trees to meet a 2050 economy? Because the tree that I plant this winter is going to be harvested in 2050. And what will that purpose of that tree be? Well, I think that the industry's made tremendous progress in putting together an industry transformational plan. It's being finalised, and it creates the opportunity to move towards a circular net zero bioeconomy. And without plantation forestry, the chances of us being able to do that is close to zero. They are important, and it has a role, and so do natives. They complement each other. And in Northland, the biggest employer, one of it, is wood processing. We've got log supply shortages. Canterbury, similar. Log supply insecurity. And in Australia, this is the point. They've got global per capita supply of timber is decreasing. Australia's log supply gap is approximately 40% of demand in 2050. Why is that important? Because we can supply logs to Australia, process all those logs that otherwise might be exported unprocessed up to China, create residues that create biomaterials, bioenergy, your bio-aviation gas that's going to enable our more sustainable aviation. And land, ETS is not going to fix the land problem. That's a policy issue. 36% of land in Auckland, Class 1, went under houses in 20 years. The RMA reform is in progress to help us support strategic initiatives that have high national benefits and to temper the predominance of individual property rights over larger national goods. So we need some bold steps, the Minister said. At Predator Free 2050, we asked ourselves, if we're going to achieve this goal, what technology would we need? We got all the best brains together. And they concluded gene technology would be important. What will help our kauri survive? We're putting genetic material into biobanks and we're going to bring it out in 20, 30, 40 years' time into a very different environment. Is it going to survive? What about the wilding problem? When I was at Scion, we aimed to generate a sterile conifer. The wilding costs are going like this. If you want to have a toxin-free, 1080-free New Zealand, then use nature to help us fight the problems of nature. And finally, if you stand in the shoes of a farmer, they've got these multiple needs. They need data to satisfy the regulator. They need data to satisfy the market. They need data to satisfy their bank. They need data to satisfy Natalie and her natural-based solutions. And at the moment, we've got disparate systems and farmers. Andrew Hogger, the president, says, I am now putting data into 9 systems that don't talk to each other. I'm time poor and it's expensive. We have to collaborate. I say congratulations to you, Natalie. We're going to work together at FarmIQ because we've got a complementarity. But this is one of the most powerful ways to move us forward. Get a data platform where we've got standards and consistency that makes it easy and gives time back to farmers to do the right things. Right, where to next? Stephen, as a leader, was getting to this, right? Here's a little truism. What are the things that matter? And what are the things that you can control? Let's focus on them. So on your Slido, you're going to see this set of questions, right? What are the priorities? Publish carbon sequestration information, take urgent action to establish a biodiversity credit, accelerate forest regeneration, recognise landowners for recovering understory. These are the things that have been suggested. Take urgent action to sustain native species planting. That's sort of the point Stephen was making. Get a significant lift in investment to support predator and pest eradication. Invest in R&D to lower seedling costs. Have a look on your Slido, rank them, and we'll watch it come up on screen. So you'll see these, and what Tane's Tea Trust and sponsors will do is this will help them, but it's also a bit of an evidence base that helps to inform, where effort should be focused. What about the opportunity to introduce a whole lot more capital? As Natalie was telling me the other day, there's more capital available than opportunities on land. You know, what you're trying to do is establish a market where you can match the suppliers of land and opportunity with the investors. And you need a measurement system, the ESG metrics, to help support that. You know, that could be transformational because it can bring a lot of capital to bear to support change on farms, and would be particularly significant for Maori, who, as we've learnt, often are asset rich and cash poor and have got multiple demands on any dividends that they generate from their commercial operations. You know, I was over in the Chatham Islands. You know, that is a highly modified landscape, but I was, when I was chair of the New Zealand Conservation Authority, it was interesting that one of the global hotspots for biodiversity is Chatham Islands. And the real challenge is we've loaded up the islands with robins to help restore these critically endangered species, but we don't have the habitat on the mainland. And, you know, the big problems there are rats and possums. There's no states yet, so thank goodness for that, and pigs. And the opportunity to get substantial reforestation on the main part of Chatham Islands through predator eradication and tree planting going hand in hand is tremendous for biodiversity restoration. All right, shall we have a look at what the overall summary is? Does it do that? You can fill it in the rest of your time so that Peter and the team have it available. And I'll just switch back to my last slide, if I could. You know, there was the Chancellor of the Exchequer of the UK said to Professor De Gusta, could you do a report on the economics of biodiversity? And this report actually is well worth reading. And he concluded, and this is my conclusion, we are totally dependent on the natural world. It supplies us with every oxygen-laden breath we take and every mouthful of food we eat. But we are currently damaging it so profoundly that many of its natural systems are now on the verge of breakdown. Is the economic rationale for biodiversity and forests compelling? You bet. Our future depends on it. Thanks very much.